Hello everyone and welcome to the latest This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field. I'm Dustin and today we are talking about what happened this past week as far as jobs, pricing, and all of that cool stuff that we talk about every single week. Upfront apologies, a couple of things. One, I got a horrible thing going on with my voice, so my voice is kind of messed up. In addition to that, I desperately need a haircut. And the lady who typically cuts my hair, she wasn't in the few days that I actually had time to get over there this week. So there's that. So these are common things that just come up, but you got to deal with it. And despite being sick, you got to keep going to make that money. So let's talk about what we did this week. So this week started off with a job that came in last week at the end of the week. It was scheduled. It was a new customer. The customer was a lady who said she had a drain that was leaking. It wasn't like an immediate thing. She did have two drains. Only one side of the sink was draining or was leaking. So scheduled that. That was pretty straightforward. Went out there. There's a specific sink strainer that I prefer to use just because it's easier to install. It can be found at Home Depot. It's made by a company called Kraus. It's made of plastic. So you don't have, I should say, the bottom is made of plastic, so you don't have issues with it rusting. It also has a design that keeps it from being able to leak if something happens in the future. That's not to say it's a perfect, there's no way it'll ever leak, but what I've come to learn is when you have the rubber and paper fiber washers that go underneath the typical metal strainer baskets, the paper ones, if you happen to get them the least bit wet, you're going to have a leak in the future. So I don't like working with those if I don't have to. They're a pain in the butt to install. This one is much easier. One, you can crank it up as much as you need to by hand and have plenty of things to hold on to, with one arm above, one bar below when it comes to that. But then the other side of it is it actually has a spot in the inside where you can use a flathead to tighten it up even more after you torque it as much as you can with your hands. So I prefer that. Everything else was pretty straightforward. There was a couple little there was the tail piece I had to replace, and there was a couple of washers that I replaced, but for the most part, it was pretty straightforward. Honestly, I was in and out of that place in less than a half hour. This is the before, this is the after. There's not much to it. The customer did have, she had two other things that she brought up while I was there. One was a roof repair, which I don't do anything with roofs. And then the other thing was there was a banister that needed to be not replaced, but it pulled out of the wall. So they basically needed to be reattached to the wall in the correct spot because it wasn't attached to the actual studs. And then after it gets reattached, there's a massive drywall repair that'll need to get done because of the blowout from the railing that they were using toggle bolts for. So we'll see what happens with that. No, nothing specifically as far as like when she wants to move forward. I always typically tell customers when you want, I would honestly say that almost 9 times out of 10, the customer will say, oh, let me show you something else while you're here. And that's fine. And if it's something I actually will do, I'll give them a ballpark price on something. And then I will say, when you want to reach out to me is when you would like to move forward with that. And that's the simplest way to do it. So that was the only thing that I actually had on Monday. I didn't have, actually, I take that back. That was the only thing I had job-wise. That job was $180. That includes $30 in materials. In addition to that, I did have a go back. Last week, I installed a pair of bifold doors. One of the sets of doors, the opening was too small for the doors that I had, so I had to trim the bottom. Well, the issue was that the amount that had to be trimmed off the bottom ended up being too much, where the solid piece of wood that the actual pin, the bottom pin sticks into, it was cut out. So I had to basically make something up or retrofit something to make it be able to hold this pin. And I had something in there, but I used super glue that I had on hand to get it to hold. It didn't hold. The super glue, basically, I don't think it was a good enough connection. And that customer actually got back to me that night and said that the door popped out and the pin, the bottom of the pin fell out. Luckily, it was a relatively simple fix. I just had to bring a piece of wood and trim it down to size to fit in the opening underneath the door, and then drill a hole for the bracket pin. And that was it. It was, again, very quick. It was like an extra 30 minutes. The customer was very understanding. I've worked with this customer for at least 3 years, probably longer. He goes back to the days when I used to do stuff with Home Depot. That's how he originally found me. But he's had me do a variety of different things over the years. I've done a ceiling fan. I've done drywall repair in one of his bathrooms. I did. His wife has a large amount of clothes, and the builder grade shelves the wire shelves that they had, they blew out. So I reinforced what they had at one point, and then that ended up having problems. So I ended up completely rebuilding what he had to make it so that it was more stable for the amount of stuff that she had that she wanted to put on this area. So long story short, it's an existing customer. He knows that I will make sure that everything is set, even if something unexpected happens like that, and that's appreciated. Those are the relationships you want to build with your customers. So that was Monday. Now, I think I mentioned this on a previous episode, but one of the things that I'm trying to fill in my schedule with is when I don't have work, because this is the time of the year where I sometimes will have 2-hour breaks, 3-hour breaks here or there in between jobs, or not specifically in between jobs, but at the end of the day, I don't have necessarily a full day's worth of stuff that's going on. That said, that shouldn't have really been the case this week, but there was a combination of a couple of different things. I had a cancellation, a different day, which I'll get into, and then there was something else that I had as well. And I was trying to fit in. I have a lot of jobs that are pre-planned, planned to already be happening. The issue is that some of them are weather dependent. The weather here in the Chicagoland area has been all over the place. You'll have one day where it's 70 degrees. The next day it'll be 30 degrees. Today I think it's just low 30s. Thursday it was 78, at the end of the day. There's massive storms that keep happening. There was, unfortunately, about 30 minutes south of me, there was a tornado a couple weeks back that wrecked a pretty decent area of a big town that's, like I said, about 30 minutes south. So the weather's been all over the place. We had hail a couple days ago. I think it was on Thursday. We had hail here. And the weather keeps going all over the place. It's funny because every time it cools off, I get a notification from Google saying, oh, it's going to warm up in the next 4 days. And it does. And then all of a sudden there's a massive storm that happens and it's going to get cold. But coming up here in the next week, there's a lot of rain, and it sucks because I have a lot of outdoor work that I would love to be able to schedule and get done. And it's not looking great for that outdoor work. And part of the reason I want to do that outdoor work is because I don't know the release schedule for these videos. I'm a couple weeks behind on actually getting the episodes released because I wanted to make sure that I had episodes recorded ahead of time. That said, this coming week is spring break for my kids, and my oldest son, he typically will work with me when he has the time available, so that he can make some extra money. And that's when I would love to have a lot of these outdoor projects that I need to get done. I do have I'll get into what we've got coming up, but the whole idea is the weather hasn't been cooperating the way I would prefer. So the whole point of me saying this is, while I've got these weird times where I have to adjust the schedule of what I have to work because of the work that I have coming in, or I should say the flow of work that I have coming in combination with the work that is outside compared to inside and the weather not cooperating, is that I have my basement. My basement is an unfinished basement. A couple years back, I paid an architect to draw plans for the entire basement based off of what I wanted, so that way I would have a starting point. Last year, I finished a basement. It wasn't a full finish. I should say that we framed out the walls, we put in drywall. They wanted the exposed ceilings, and then they also wanted, we had flooring that we put throughout. There was tearing out a drop ceiling to make it exposed ceilings. There's a lot of different components of this basement that I did last year. Before I did that basement, I had done pretty much all of the same things, just not collectively in one project. The customers were very happy with how the project came out. Essentially, they were turning one space that was storage into a playroom for their kids. And then the other space, which was more of an open area that they weren't utilizing, they were turning that into like a media space. And then there was another room that was storage that was going to be turned into like a gym workout area. They were very happy with the work. And while I am confident that I can do the majority of all of those things, I have my own basement to use as a practice ground. I don't, as I've said before, I don't like doing drywall. I can certainly hang drywall, but I will probably end up having someone. But my basement is set up where it's a very large space. I don't have the ability to do it all at once because I have a lot of stuff in my basement. So I have to do it in bits and pieces. So from the depth to the other side, I have to do that entire wall. I have an electrician who's supposed to be coming out and replacing the electric panel, bringing it out, and then putting in a sub panel for the electric for the basement, which I would like to get scheduled in the next couple of weeks. But in the meantime, the concrete walls that are there, I got foam board up on them. This is throughout the week, not just on Monday. But I've been trying to like persistently move forward. So different days I would pick up things to get this done. I had a large amount of lumber delivered for the framing of what I need to do. Also, one of the very first room that's being done is actually a storage room. They'll have storage shelves for those typical Home Depot bins, which you can't see it, but they're the ones with the yellow lids on it. You can get them at Home Depot, Lowe's, Costco, Sam's Club. They're all over the place. But they're all about the same exact size. And I'm making a rack that holds a number of that size bin, where all of our storage stuff, our Christmas decorations and things will all be contained in this one room. And the entire idea behind that is that then that'll be a majority of what we have as far as storage that'll have a spot to go so that I can move to the next area, which is putting the underground drainage in for a bathroom in my basement. That's the next phase. I will probably say is the next phase, but getting that storage room and this one wall with the electric done is the first phase. So that said, actually I did talk about this. I'm not sure, I completely forgot. A couple weeks ago, I had the carpenter here to reroute the stairs to turn it into an L shape so that it opens not towards a wall that'll eventually be a wall, but goes a different direction. And the entire intent behind that is, while I didn't necessarily need to do that right this second, I did that now because the edge of those stairs butts up to a closet that butts up to the bathroom. So I need to get all of that measured out before the plumber actually comes. But it was more of the carpenter that I had do it. He had the time, and that's why I used him to do that. So there's a lot of days this specific week that I had some extra time, and I was using that extra time to work in my basement. I had to do a couple of things like there were little bumps of cement from when the foundation was poured that I had to chip out. There was a couple of surface level cracks for just, small surface cracks that needed to be patched ahead of time. So I took care of that. Then installed foam board, and then hopefully by the end of this weekend, I will have that back wall framed out. And the reason why is because I had a large amount of lumber delivered for these shelves, which there's a lot of lumber involved. And it's all sitting by my back door. I have a walkout basement, and it's all sitting back there outside of what I need for that wall. It was in my driveway. My two sons moved it all back to the backyard yesterday, but the problem is that we have probably 3-4 inches of rain coming in the next, starting on Tuesday, and it's Saturday. So I need to be able to get all of that lumber inside by Monday at the latest in order for it not to be all wet. And I don't want it wet because I want to be able to work on this as I have the time. So I really need to get that wall done. So that said, let's move on. Tuesday, it was supposed to be a cartridge swap for a shower faucet. That customer canceled the day before. So one of my previous customers that I did the doors for in their basement, they had a couple of things that they needed done. There was a ice fridge or an ice maker that needed to be taken out. and then replaced with a new one. There was a light fixture that needed to be replaced, and there was an outside outlet that was not working. So the ice maker, for whatever reason, I kept thinking that this was going to be something where it was just like, oh, you just have to pull it out. But the reason why it was more difficult than that was because the actual frame of the cabinet had to be disassembled in order to pull it out. So the door had to be taken off. The frame itself was a faux frame, not actually connected to a box. And that had to be taken out. And then you basically had to like shimmy the ice maker out of there to get it out. There was a drain line that was way too short behind, and a water line that actually has a shutoff in the cabinet next to it. So that took a little bit more time than I thought it was going to, but the only reason it actually took more time was because there was a horrible protective covering all over this stainless steel that it just would not come off in like a nice pull. It kept tearing and it just took forever. The light fixture was straightforward, upgrading a fluorescent light to an LED one with an integrated LED into it. So that way he doesn't have to worry about the bulbs. And then the outdoor outlet was, again, straightforward. The outlet just didn't work. It was a bad outlet. And then he wanted to be able to use the outlet for Christmas lights and such. So I put on an in-use cover instead of just the standard metal flap one that's you see most of the time. So that was pretty straightforward. That entire job was $485. I was there for, I think it was about 3 hours total. And then out of that, there was like a little over $100 of materials between the light and the outlet. Wednesday, I had absolutely nothing Wednesday. And that was because there was something that I was trying to get to happen on Wednesday, and it just wasn't going to work out as far as the timing of it. There was a combination of a couple of different things, and because of that, it just didn't work out. Going back to Tuesday real quick, there was my property manager that I've been working with. He sent me out to a building in the same complex as some other stuff I've been doing that had a bad buzzer box. I don't know how else to call it. It's a doorbell box. You push the button and then they buzz you in. They needed to get an idea of how much it would cost to repair it. Typically, I don't like going out just to find out how much something's going to cost because you have to diagnose it to be able to actually give them a legitimate cost. This seemed to be a power issue, so I gave them a price, and I just happened to be, no joke, like a mile away from the job that I had on Tuesday was like a mile away. So I was able to give them a quick price, send them a quote. If they go ahead with it, great. If they don't, they don't. But I'm not going to lose out on anything because I was already in the vicinity of that job. On the flip side, I've had issues with the property manager in the past where he sent me out to do something and then I couldn't do whatever he wanted me to do because of something that was outside my control. And I think I brought this up before, but it's frustrating because, so just as an example, I was sent out in January to do a job where the entire intention of the job was, it was supposed to be, the tenants moved out. It was a single family home that was for rent. And they wanted to basically get the property in nice shape to be able to sell it. Okay, that's great. So I was told to go there to make a punch list with the intention that I would be doing the punch list. Now, the way I do punch lists, especially for somebody who's looking to sell, is I tell them everything that there is, and then I give them rough prices for everything, but I don't go into super depth because the thing is, like, they're going to ultimately pick and choose. They're not going to pick everything that you ask, that you tell them to do. You're just telling them things that, you should do. There are certain towns in my area where they require the city to have an inspection outside of just a normal home inspection from when you're under contract. And the city requires certain things, like things have to be up to a certain level. Like, for example, you have to have the right amount of smoke detectors installed. You have to have a CO2 or a carbon monoxide detector. You have to have, the railings have to be secure. There's a number of different things, but the whole idea is that things are supposed to work. GFCIs have to be installed in the kitchen. Outlets, they need to be able to, they need to be working properly and all of that. And he sent me out there, and when I got there, it was a very cold day. There was a lockbox. The lockbox code did not work. Actually, I take that. Yeah, the lockbox code did not work. I got in touch with the property manager. He told me a couple of other codes to try. None of them worked. So essentially, that lockbox was useless. Come to find out, well, not come to find out, what he wanted me to do instead was he had a key to get in the house, but this was like 30 minutes away from their office and also the same town that I'm in. Wanted me to get the key and then install another lockbox that they had. So I had to go back, pick up the lockbox, pick up the key, and go back to the house just to be able to get in the house. And then remove the old lockbox because it wasn't going to work. I did all of that and I didn't even get paid. And then on top of that, the punch list that got created, the punch list, the owner of the house decided they were just going to sell the house as is and not do anything to it. So it was a unique scenario because not only did I ended up doing stuff, but I ended up not getting paid for anything. And in the long run, I should have just charged for the service trips, and I didn't. And I've made that very clear that I can't do that anymore for the property manager because even with the lockbox, I'm installing the lockbox on behalf of them. If they would like to send, one of their techs to go do it, if they've got somebody in-house that they want to go send to do it, they certainly can. But I can't be running around doing stuff and not making any money on it. It just eats up my time. That said, on Wednesday, I didn't specifically have something scheduled because I was in a scenario where I was trying to take care of a couple of other things. So I spent a lot of time working on my basement, and then that was basically the gist of Wednesday. On Thursday, I had a quick job in the morning that consisted of getting, there was a siding issue at a house. There's a new customer contacted me earlier in the week, I think it was like Monday or Tuesday, and they had some vinyl siding on the side of their house that had blown up, came disconnected. So I went out there with my extension ladder, got the siding put back in place, had pictures, here's the before and after. The thing is that I knew it was going to probably be an issue because where they live it's very windy. They live on one of the southernmost towns that are still close to the Chicagoland area. And there's a lot of wind from the south that comes up and kicks the siding. And I knew this was going to become an issue because the siding was stretched just a little bit too much. And there are these clips that I've used in the past to extend the lip of where the siding attaches to, so that way you can make sure it clicks in place. But I didn't have any of the clips. And to be honest, they had said that this had been repaired before, where it just needed to be snapped back in place. So I just figured that's what it was. It was just, a quick thing. It was a quick thing. It was snapped back in place. Later on that day was the day that we had the hail and the winds, and it came undone again. So there was that whole problem where it didn't work out. So not a great scenario. I have to go back there, but I'll have to go back there after I get the actual clips. So that job was $180 for that repair. And that's just because I charge a certain amount for, the minimum is $150, but when it includes something like having to have special equipment like an extension ladder or high liability with a ladder or something like that, I tack on a little bit more. Now the go back I'm probably not even going to honestly charge anything for it. I should, but I'm not probably going to because it's not worth it. This is a new customer. They also had some other things that they asked me about when I was there, like hanging some racks in their garage. So we'll see what happens with that. Friday was a situation where the property manager sent me out to a house that was like almost an hour away to take a look at an issue. Now, this came up in the past for something. He had asked me about this before. He said it was a drywall repair. There was a leak at some point during the winter, and there was a massive problem with water. And because of the water, the plumber came out, cut a bunch of holes, as plumbers typically do. And he wanted to figure out, one, if the leak was still happening, and two, whether or not, or how much it would cost to get the ceiling repaired. I knew this was going to be way bigger of a project than what he was making it out to be. So I explicitly told him, one, I can't go out there if I'm not getting paid a service trip, because it's outside of where I would normally go. And to be honest, to go out there to basically look at everything and to go out there and find out that there is no leaks. I've got nothing to show for it, so I need to get paid. I spent about an hour trying everything to replicate this leak. The plumber that was out there before, they never found anything. So I'm convinced that the leak actually was caused by the tenant running their faucet while it was cold outside, and something happened. They don't know where it came from. I'm convinced because of what they said that they specifically said that the only thing that they were running while it was really cold outside was this one sink. Now, the sink location of where it is in the direct path of where the initial main spot where it was leaking was, but also close enough to the other area where it was leaking. I wasn't able to replicate anything. And the problem is that they don't know if, they didn't leave the water running, but the water could have been running and just pooling somewhere for the longest time. So it's impossible to know for sure where exactly the water came from. It's not leaking anymore, so it must have been something from there, because also the plumber took a look at everything, and if it was an issue with a broken or burst pipe, then the broken or burst pipe would have still been leaking all this time, since the plumber hasn't been able to fix anything or find anything to fix. So the problem is that the property manager was like, oh, it's just a simple patch and paint. Just patch it and paint it. And the drywall's wrecked. The seams are all completely, they were all saturated, which means you're going to have to take all that out. The drywall itself is going to start sagging over time because it was wet, because of how much water was in it. So we're probably talking ripping out the entire ceiling. And unfortunately, because it's such a large opening to go wall to wall and wall to wall, you're talking 20, 25 sheets of drywall to completely do the ceiling. That sucks. So I got in touch with the property manager and basically said, this is going to be a much bigger problem than I think anybody thought it was going to be. We're going to, they might want to get their insurance involved, because this isn't going to be a cheap thing. And I don't think anybody's thinking that this is going to be I think all the amounts that everybody's thinking is that it's a lot less than what it actually will be. Now, it could certainly be patched and painted. It's not going to look good. And the problem is that this house rents for $2,800 a month. So you have to have a certain level of quality when it comes to renting something like that. You can't have something that looks like crap because of that. And there's so many spots that are going to need to be repaired that it is probably just going to be in the best interest long-term, not necessarily financially, but long-term, to just replace all of the drywall. It sucks because it's not a small, easy project whatsoever. But for that diagnosis, I was sitting at about $150 for that. Then I came home, worked on my basement some more. That's when I actually put up the foam boards. After the foam boards got put up, actually I take that back. I went to Home Depot and got the concrete crack filler to fix the surface cracks. And then after that, then I put the foam boards up while my boys were bringing the wood in. And then that was basically my Friday. Saturday, again, I don't typically work Saturdays, but here I am working on a Saturday again. Had the drywall repair that I was doing last week for some bubbling. Went back to that, sanded that down, painted the wall, turned out well. Of course, that customer also was asking. That is a unique thing, because that again is related to the property manager. However, that set of buildings is actually an HOA. So it's a unique scenario because the damage that was potentially caused is by something from the exterior, so the HOA is paying for it. However, everything that's typically inside of the units, because they're technically condos, is related to the owner. So while I was there, they asked me how much it would cost to paint their laundry room, gave them a quote for that. And then we get to the last job of the week. So the drywall painting job, the total on that one's going to be about $290 with 2 different trips. And then the door. So then we get to this last one. So I've had a lot of new customers calling me recently, asking me about various different things. One of them that called me, or they technically texted me yesterday, which was exactly what I want them to do. My voicemail specifically states, please text me for quicker response. And they did. So I got back to them right away. They had a set of bifold doors installed about a month ago. and they were not happy with whoever they hired. Typically, that's a red flag to me because I'm not going to say that you can't install bifold doors. Somebody can't screw it up. They certainly can. If they haven't done it enough, they might not be able to line them up perfectly and it might look off. I've done them enough to know, if this is not even, adjust this pin. If that's not even, or there's too big of a gap, adjust this. I've done this enough where I know that, but that's something that just comes from experience. That specifically, this customer, there was a couple of red flags. The first red flag was that they said that they weren't happy with another contractor. Typically, you just ask for the contractor to come back, or at least give them the opportunity to come back. I don't know if they did or they didn't, or if they just weren't happy with the contractor, and that's why they didn't want them to come back. The second thing was they asked how much it would cost for me to, make the adjustments. Now, typically, I would charge $150 to come out because that's my minimum. When I gave them the minimum, they said, wow, that seems really high. And I was like, I understand, that's just my minimum. And the thing is, if someone is not happy with that minimum, they're not obligated to pay me. They could go find somebody else who would obviously offer them a cheaper price. But there's a reason they're calling me. It's because I've got good reviews on Google and it helps that exists. So that said, there was that. And then she asked if there was any discounts. And I do offer discounts. Senior, veteran, first responders, medical personnel, they all get 10% off individually. You can't combine it, but it's 10% off the labor charge. So as long as there's no materials, it's just straight 10% off, which would then bring it down to $135. So that was fine. She asked for a discount. I don't have an issue with that. It's built into it to a certain degree because I have a certain level built in for fees for credit cards and things like that, since I accept credit cards for payment as well. So okay, that's fine. The next thing was, well, can you come tomorrow? And the thing is, when people nowadays, they don't have a lot of patience. They want things fixed right away. But for something like this, it's not really something that needs to be fixed right away. I understand if you've got something that's spraying water all over the place, you want someone as quick as possible. You don't have electricity or something's not working, like your fridge or something. You're trying to troubleshoot what it is. Those things are things that need to get addressed right away. So long story short, I told her I was available between 10 and 11 because I knew I'd be wrapping up with this other job that was right in the same town. And their response to that was, oh, great. If you're available between 10 and 11, can you come at 11? And I was like, okay. I knew that meant that I was going to end up waiting and just wasting time. I also knew based off the pictures that this was probably going to be, like, no joke, a 5-minute repair. And I knew that was what was going to happen, was just because I've messed with these doors so many times that it just ends up being something very simple. So I explained I don't typically work on Saturdays, but I will happen to be in the area for a different job, so I can swing by and take care of this. So I went over there today, took care of it. It, of course, was 5 minutes. But then they had about 6, 7, 8 different things that they wanted to get looked at. They had a couple of cabinets where the hinges weren't properly closing all the way. Honestly, they just need hinges the hinges are probably from like the mid-90s, so they're probably just the soft closing. That mechanism used to be a piece of plastic, and that flexes too much, and then it just doesn't work. So you need new hinges. For those, there was... They were talking about potentially adding trim around the bifold door, but the issue with that was that there's not really a need for it. It just is a cosmetic thing. But they were also specific about talking about how much certain things were going to cost. So they would ask the cost as it goes, which is fine. But then they would immediately make a comment about, oh, well, we need to watch how much we spend to each other, not to me. And that leads me to believe that, okay, that's fine. I'm fine with, you wanting to pinch pennies or be, more conservative with your spending. That's certainly fine. I know full well that it's difficult under a fixed income to, have money to do things. But the issue is that when they said this, then they would immediately come up with another thing that they wanted to do or another thing that they wanted to do, and they would just keep adding to it, which... The problem is that, like, if you pick and choose certain things aren't going to be other things. So for example, as I was leaving, it's a condo and they have a metal door that is slightly sagging. So the hinges probably just need to be replaced because the hinges are just old, and then that'll help pull it back together with new screws and everything. The problem is that by itself would be $60, but you have to hit the minimum. So you have to do one of these other things to adjust some of the other stuff that needs, to make sure that you're hitting the minimum. And I don't like when someone asks about one thing, because I have to make sure, especially with a new customer, that I hit the minimum before I start giving smaller prices. So long story short, I think that they're probably going to have like close to like $200-300 worth of stuff that they're going to want to do. We'll see. Ultimately, I need to figure out if I can even get hinges for the spots that are there, because I don't particularly want to go the route of having to route out the cabinet doors for bigger holes. So that was a $135. So that brings our total for the entire week to $1,420. Not a bad week. There was a little bit of materials in there. My current goal is about $1,500 without materials. My ideal goal, what I would love to be at, is $2,000 a week without materials. That doesn't happen very often. I shouldn't say that. It does happen, actually. It does happen a lot, but it's more of when I have these bigger projects. A lot of this stuff is smaller stuff, so it doesn't add up to, a huge amount. But I'm okay with that amount for the week, because I also was able to do a lot of work in my basement. This coming week, like I said, what do I have this coming week? This coming week, I have a deck repair. That's a pretty big job by itself. It's like $1,200. But it's only a one-day project. I have a customer that I painted her garage and hung up a bunch of garage organization a couple weeks ago. She has a list of stuff that needs to get done outside, small minor repairs, and then something to do with fixing something to do with her swing set in her backyard. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do that, because there's supposed to be rain, and the day that she had available, there's rain rain forecasted for that day. I have another customer who has, they're the same customer from last week, where I was doing a bunch of minor things, but one of the things they wanted done was look at their pool pump, ceiling fan, and a faucet. They also need their seasonal stuff done, which is installing the pool fence around their pool and swapping out the glass and screens that they have on their 4-season room or 3-season room without a heater. That stuff I typically do. I've done that pretty much every spring and fall for them for the last 2 years. But again, I need the weather to not be raining and storming while I'm doing that. So that's, again, something else that I have. I do have an estimate at the end of the week for a bigger project for a customer who's moving out of their house. And then I also have that cartridge job, hypothetically, that's not that cartridge job. No, minor painting job as well, with a mirror hanging for a customer that I had from last year that I did some work for. So we'll see what ends up happening with some of these. We'll see what happens. I mean, the thing is, I have stuff that I can add in too if the weather cooperates. I have a couple of other things, but again, they're all like either mostly outside or all outside. And right now they're spraying scheduled Tuesday through Friday. So hopefully I can get some of this other stuff done. I do have a customer, the cabinet drawer pullouts, and hopefully I can get that scheduled for the week, maybe towards the end of the week, because that's the majority of that work is inside. The only problem is that one of the things I'm supposed to do is touch up paint, some exterior siding and wood siding, and if it's raining, it's not going to work. So I, again, limited on how much I can do with the weather. I don't have a lot of other inside stuff at the moment that I have that I could, fit into my schedule without breaking it up into multiple trips, and I prefer not to do that. So we'll see what ends up happening this week. But anyway, 1420 for the week. I'm trying to make sure I get you guys the actual numbers because I wasn't doing so great with coming up with those before. As we get closer to the end of the month, I'll have total month numbers on the next episode. But we'll see what happens. Hopefully, maybe the weather will just go my way and it'll get better, because if it does, that'll be perfect for me, because then I can get a lot of this other stuff done. A lot of this stuff I could have my son work with me and he can make some money and I could get some stuff done, knocked out a lot faster. So we'll see what happens. But hopefully you guys enjoyed the breakdown this week. Every single Monday I'm releasing new episodes of This Week in the Field. And if you're not checking out the episodes that we have, or the videos that we have on Thursdays, be sure to check those out, as they're different business advice videos on how to run a handyman business or how to start your handyman business, but specifically just how I did certain things and just what you guys can gain from my experience. Appreciate it if you guys check those out as well. So with all of that being said, this has been This Week in the Field with the Handyman in the Field, and we'll see you guys next time.